What happens when one of Hollywood's most composed and private stars walks into a studio known for unfiltered opinions and finds herself pushed to her absolute limit on live television when Scarlett Johansson settled into the guest chair on The View that October morning? The actress, whose carefully cultivated poise had protected her through 2 decades of Hollywood scrutiny, had no idea she was about to experience the most intense confrontation of her career. This wasn't going to be some minor disagreement about film choices or a spirited debate about acting techniques. This was going to be a public reckoning about past controversies, a test of how much scrutiny one woman could withstand before finally pushing back, and a masterclass in how to defend yourself with quiet strength when someone with power decides to put you on trial. What you're about to witness is the moment Scarlett Johansson stopped apologizing for existing. The instant when careful composure gave way to controlled fury and a conversation that became a cultural flashpoint about accountability, double standards, and whether women in Hollywood ever get to simply move forward. The morning sun streamed through the windows of The View's Manhattan studio, illuminating the familiar set where countless celebrities had sat, where hot topics dominated the discourse, where opinions flowed freely and confrontation was considered entertainment. The production team moved with practiced efficiency through their pre-show routines. Cameras positioned, lighting adjusted, microphones tested. The studio audience filed in with that familiar buzz of excitement that comes from being part of daytime television's most-watched talk show. Scarlett Johansson's car pulled up to the studio entrance at 9:30 a.m., 45 minutes before her scheduled segment. At 39 years old, Scarlett had perfected the art of the promotional interview. The polished smile, the rehearsed anecdotes, the graceful pivots away from uncomfortable topics. She emerged wearing a simple black dress that contrasted sharply against the show's vibrant backdrop, her hair pulled back in a clean bun that suggested both elegance and no-nonsense professionalism. "Miss Johansson, we're so excited to have you here," the production coordinator said, her voice carrying that reverent tone people use around major celebrities. "The whole team has been looking forward to this." "Thank you," Scarlett replied, her voice warm but guarded. "Looking forward to talking about the film." In the green room, her publicist Maya leaned close as makeup artists worked. "Just keep it light," she whispered urgently. "If they try to steer it political or bring up old controversies, pivot back to the film. Don't engage." Scarlett nodded, her expression composed. She'd done hundreds of these interviews over 2 decades. She knew the game. Smile, deflect, promote, exit. How difficult could this be? What Scarlett didn't know, what she couldn't have anticipated, was that The View had a reputation for taking discussions off script, and that Whoopi Goldberg had decided this morning was the time for a serious conversation about accountability. In another part of the studio, Whoopi sat reviewing her notes with an expression that suggested she had very specific plans for this interview. Over the years, Whoopi had become known for not shying away from difficult conversations, for asking questions that made guests uncomfortable, for using her platform to push back against what she saw as Hollywood's avoidance of responsibility. "We need to address the casting controversies," Whoopi said to the producers. "That's the elephant in the room. Everyone's thinking about it. We'd be doing a disservice not to bring it up." One producer looked uncertain. "She's here to promote the film. Maybe we should keep it focused." "That's exactly why we need to ask," Whoopi interrupted firmly. "This is when we have her attention. This is when real conversation happens." What Whoopi didn't fully understand was that Scarlett Johansson had spent years absorbing criticism, fielding accusations, apologizing for choices, and trying to move forward, and that patience, even in someone as composed as Scarlett, eventually reaches its limit. The show's opening proceeded normally. The hosts discussed their hot topics with characteristic energy, opinions flying freely around the table. Then came the transition to Scarlett's segment, and the energy in the studio shifted as one of Hollywood's biggest stars prepared to join them. "Please welcome the amazing, talented Scarlett Johansson," Whoopi announced, and the audience erupted in genuine enthusiasm. Scarlett walked onto the set with that practiced grace, waving to the crowd, her smile warm and professional. She greeted each host in turn, Whoopi with a respectful handshake, Sunny Hostin with friendly warmth, Joy Behar with practiced pleasantness before settling into the guest chair with composed confidence. The first few minutes proceeded smoothly enough. General pleasantries about the new film, light discussion about working with the director, easy territory that felt safe and familiar. But even during this warm-up, something in Whoopi's tone felt heavier than usual, more deliberate, as if she was building towards something. "So, Scarlett," Whoopi began, her hands clasped on the desk, her voice taking on that particular quality she used when shifting into serious mode. "You've played a lot of strong women on screen, but lately, people online have been saying that some of your casting choices were, let's say, controversial. What's your take on that?" The shift was subtle, but unmistakable. The atmosphere in the studio changed instantly, the warm promotion suddenly pivoting into something more confrontational. Scarlett blinked, caught slightly off guard, though her face remained composed. "Well," she said evenly, her media training kicking in automatically, "I think every actor's job is to explore humanity in all its forms. My intention has always been to tell meaningful stories that resonate with audiences. But you can understand why some people found it tone-deaf, right?" Joy leaned in, a smirk playing at her lips. Taking on roles that people thought should have gone to someone else, someone from that actual community. Scarlett gave a small nod, her fingers tapping the table once a subtle tell that anyone who knew her would recognize as suppressed tension. "I understand that conversation has happened. I also believe in creative freedom and in learning from the discourse around these choices. But isn't that a bit of a privilege?" Whoopi interrupted softly, but her tone carried weight. Being able to say you can learn after you've already taken a role that someone else might never get a chance to even audition for. A ripple of tension moved through the audience. Some murmured in agreement. Others shifted uncomfortably. The studio crew behind the cameras seemed to hold their breath, recognizing that this had moved beyond typical interview territory into something more charged. Scarlett hesitated, her smile tightening almost imperceptibly. "I think everyone learns in their own time," she said carefully. "I've been open about my experiences and my mistakes, but I don't think it's fair to define my entire career by one controversy." Joy glanced toward Whoopi. Whoopi didn't break eye contact with Scarlett. "But people are defined by their choices," Whoopi said quietly. Each word deliberate, especially in this industry. "You know that." Scarlett's eyes flickered just for a moment, but the camera caught it. That subtle shift when patience begins to wear thin. The audience sensed it, too. Some murmured, others laughed awkwardly, as if trying to break the building tension. Sunny tried to smooth things over, her voice carrying that peacekeeping tone. "Let's not forget the film itself," she interjected, which, by the way, touches on those very themes. Identity, second chances, resilience. Sure, Whoopi said, cutting Sunny off with a wave of her hand. "But we're talking real life here, not movies. Because when you're as famous as Scarlett Johansson, when you have that level of platform and privilege, people expect awareness. Don't you think that's fair?" Scarlett inhaled deeply. "I do," she said slowly, her voice controlled, but with an edge beginning to show. "But I also think sometimes discussions like this get framed unfairly, especially toward women." That hit differently. A few audience members clapped spontaneously. Scarlett continued, her voice sharpening with each word. "Men make mistakes all the time in this industry, and they're allowed to evolve quietly, to move on without constant interrogation. Women are expected to publicly apologize, to perform guilt, to prove endlessly that they've changed. I don't think that's equality. I think that's punishment." A hum of approval moved through the crowd, but Whoopi's expression remained unreadable. Her face a mask of thoughtful skepticism. "Interesting," she said, finally leaning back slightly. "So, you think you've been punished?" Scarlett tilted her head, her composure cracking just enough to reveal the steel beneath. "I think I've been held to a different standard. That's not bitterness, that's fact." The studio seemed to freeze. It was that rare kind of television silence, the kind that feels alive with electricity, where everyone watching knows something significant is happening. Scarlett sat up straighter, her voice gaining strength. "I'm proud of the work I've done, the conversations my films have started, the characters I've brought to life, but I also think it's time to move forward. I'm not going to sit here and relitigate the same thing over and over again. She paused, then looked directly at Whoopi, her gaze unwavering, especially not when the people doing the relitigating should know better. Gasps erupted throughout the studio. Audience members' mouths fell open. Whoopi's eyebrows rose sharply, her lips tightening with visible surprise. Should know better, Whoopi repeated, her voice carrying disbelief mixed with something that might have been respect. What exactly do you mean by that? Scarlett didn't flinch. Her voice remained steady, but the politeness had been replaced by something more honest, more raw. Yes, you've been in this industry a long time. You've seen how women are treated when they speak up, how easily their narratives get twisted, how the standard applied to them is different from what's applied to men. I came here to talk about my film, not to defend my humanity over and over again. The tension was now undeniable, like a storm hovering just above the table, ready to break at any moment. Joy tried to break it with humor, her nervous energy palpable. Okay, let's not start a cage match before commercial, she joked, but the laughter from the audience was nervous, uncertain. No cage match, Scarlett said with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Just honesty. Whoopi's face softened slightly, but her intensity remained. Fair enough, she said. Honesty's good, but when you sit in that chair, you know we're going to ask the real stuff. That's what people watch for. And I respect that, Scarlett replied, her voice calm, but carrying weight. But there's a difference between a question and an accusation. That line landed hard. The producers could be seen off stage frantically signaling to cut to commercial, but Whoopi ignored them completely. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice but not her intensity. You know, Scarlett, I actually like you. I think you're smart, talented, thoughtful. But sometimes when people in your position talk about double standards, it sounds like they're out of touch. You've got millions of dollars, massive platform, incredible privilege. So when you say you're being punished, people might not buy that. Scarlett's jaw tightened visibly. Her hands, which had been resting calmly on the table, pressed together with barely controlled tension. I didn't say I was a victim, she said, her voice quiet, but carrying across the studio with perfect clarity. I said I was tired of being mischaracterized. The words hung in the air like glass, sharp, reflective, fragile. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The silence was profound, heavy with meaning. Then Whoopi leaned back, giving a half-smile that didn't reach her eyes. Fair, but mischaracterized by who? The media or the people who just don't agree with you? Maybe both. Scarlett met her gaze directly, refusing to look away. But when you have a platform like this, your words shape those perceptions. So, I just ask that we use that power with care. The audience erupted in applause, this time louder, more sustained, almost protective of Scarlett. Whoopi looked at the crowd, then back at Scarlett, her expression unreadable. Oh, don't worry, honey, she said, her tone dipping into something that mixed sarcasm with condescension. I always use my power carefully. I've been doing this longer than most of your co-stars have been alive. Scarlett smiled, but it was cool, controlled, carrying quiet strength. Then you should understand exactly what I mean. The segment finally cut to commercial, but the tension didn't dissipate. As the cameras stopped rolling, Whoopi leaned back, muttering something to Joy, who gave a nervous half-laugh. Scarlett sat quietly, her hands still clasped on the table, her composure maintained, but her eyes revealing the storm of emotions beneath. Maya, her publicist, rushed to the edge of the stage, whispering frantically to a producer. Someone in the audience, still processing what they'd witnessed, said what everyone was thinking. Did Scarlett Johansson just check Whoopi Goldberg on live TV? During the commercial break, the atmosphere backstage was electric with tension. Production assistants exchanged wide-eyed looks. Crew members whispered urgently into headsets. The energy had shifted from routine interview to something unprecedented. When they returned from commercial, Whoopi's demeanor had changed slightly, less confrontational, more reflective. We've been having an intense conversation with Scarlett Johansson, she said to camera, her voice measured. And I think it's important. These are the conversations we need to have. Scarlett nodded, her composure fully restored, her mask of professionalism back in place. I agree. Conversation is how we grow, but conversation requires mutual respect. The rest of the segment proceeded with careful politeness, both women navigating around the explosive moment that had just occurred. They discussed the film, shared lighter anecdotes, but everyone watching knew that what had happened couldn't be erased by pleasantries. When Scarlett finally left the set, walking off with her head held high and her dignity intact, the studio erupted in discussion. Audience members immediately pulled out their phones. Crew members replayed the moments in their minds. The host sat in stunned reflection about what had just transpired. Within minutes, clips from the interview flooded social media. Twitter exploded with reactions. Instagram stories captured screenshots of Scarlett's most powerful moments. TikTok creators began making reaction videos, their faces showing shock and admiration. Did you see the way she didn't flinch? One viral tweet read, "Scarlett Johansson just gave a masterclass in standing your ground with grace." Others pushed back. Whoopi asked fair questions. Scarlett got defensive. She still doesn't understand accountability. By noon, Scarlett Whoopi was trending #1 worldwide. The confrontation had transcended a simple interview moment. It had become a cultural referendum on accountability, privilege, double standards, and how women navigate public scrutiny. Entertainment news outlets scrambled to analyze every second. Scarlett Johansson stands up to Whoopi Goldberg, read one headline. The View gets heated. Johansson versus Goldberg, proclaimed another. Think pieces appeared within hours. Some praising Scarlett's composure, others questioning whether her response was appropriate. Inside her car heading through Manhattan, Scarlett scrolled through her phone, watching the numbers rise. The notifications blur together. Every ping carried a new opinion, a new judgment, a new interpretation of her words. You broke the internet, Maya said softly from across the seat. Scarlett smirked faintly. I didn't mean to. You never do, Mia replied. But this time feels different. They're not just arguing about what you said. They're actually listening. Scarlett looked out the window at the city rushing past, listening or waiting for something to twist. Meanwhile, at the View's production office, the atmosphere was equally electric, but for different reasons. Ratings projections were through the roof. Social media engagement had exploded. The segment would be replayed, analyzed, and discussed for days. Joy walked into the staff lounge with her coffee. Well, I guess we're viral again. Whoopi appeared moments later, sunglasses on, her expression thoughtful. That got intense. It did. Sunny agreed, joining them with her phone in hand. But people are genuinely debating it. Not just the confrontation, but the substance. Accountability. Double standards. How we treat women differently. Whoopi nodded slowly. Good. That's what the show's supposed to do. By evening, late-night talk shows were already making jokes about it. Next week on The View, Scarlett Johansson and Whoopi Goldberg in Civil War. One host quipped to audience laughter, but underneath the jokes, people weren't laughing. They were arguing, defending, empathizing. Scarlett had unintentionally tapped into something deeper than a simple interview moment. A cultural conversation about forgiveness, growth, and whether anyone, especially women in the public eye, ever gets to simply move forward. That night, Scarlett sat alone in her apartment, the city humming outside with its restless pulse. She'd silenced her phone hours ago, but opened her laptop to watch the episode back, not to relive it, but to see it through others' eyes. She watched herself sit calmly, smile tightly, push back firmly. For the first time in a long while, she saw not just an actress performing composure, but a woman fighting to stay grounded in a world that constantly demanded she perform her pain, apologize for her existence, prove herself worthy over and over again. Then her phone vibrated with a message she didn't expect. From Whoopi. You held your ground. That's rare. Don't let the noise drown out what mattered. Scarlett stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Thank you. You asked the questions I needed to answer. A moment later, Whoopi replied. Good. Then it was worth it. Scarlett set the phone down, feeling something inside her settle, a strange mix of exhaustion and release. For once, she didn't care what the headline said. The moment had already transcended them. By the next morning, the ripple effects had reached every corner of Hollywood. Talk shows replayed the exchange in full. Bloggers wrote op-eds titled Scarlett Johansson's most honest interview. Yet some called it her redemption. Others called it performance art. But the truth was simpler. Scarlett had stopped defending herself and simply spoke her truth. The confrontation that began as uncomfortable television became something more significant. A conversation about how we hold public figures accountable, whether growth is ever enough, and whether women in particular ever get to simply move on from past mistakes without constant interrogation. 2 days later, Whoopi addressed it on The View. Look, people think when we challenge guests, it's about conflict. It's not. It's about conversation. Scarlett Johansson came here and didn't back down. I respect that. That's how truth happens when nobody runs from it. That afternoon, Scarlett reposted a clip with a simple caption, "Conversation, not confrontation." The post broke 1 million likes in an hour. What started as a tense interview became a cultural moment about authenticity, accountability, and the courage it takes to stand your ground with quiet strength when someone with power decides to test you. Scarlett Johansson walked onto that set as a carefully composed actress promoting a film. She walked off, having reminded everyone that sometimes the most powerful response isn't aggression or defensiveness. It's simply refusing to be diminished, speaking your truth with calm conviction, and trusting that your dignity speaks louder than any attack. And in that moment, both women, despite their confrontation, perhaps because of it, demonstrated something rare and valuable, that you can disagree intensely without destroying each other. That truth can emerge from tension, and that sometimes the conversations we need most are the ones that make us most uncomfortable.